Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be on these two knives, and it's thanks to a fellow traditional knife enthusiast and a fellow Barlow Bearcat, Trevor. So I want to say a huge thank you to Trevor for being willing to send these knives just for me to check out. I really enjoy getting to do that, getting to check out knives that I probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to, especially when it's two really cool, pretty old knives like these. So these are two Fightin Rooster knives. And Fightin Rooster is a brand that's not really around anymore. It's a brand that was made by a company called Frank Buster. So there's a different tank stamp. There's actually two different tank stamps across these two knives, and it's interesting because it's a really great sample and sample size example, I guess you could say, of the different eras or runs of these Fightin Rooster knives. But they were made by Frank Buster and his cutlery company, or rather contracted by Frank Buster's cutlery company, because as you can see here, you can see that it says Solingen. So that is the city in Germany that is most well known for their cutlery, for their pocket knives. And that's true. That's the place of manufacture for both of these knives here. And these were contracted to a factory that, from looking into it online, I found was called the Olbert's factory. And now it can be really difficult to find concrete information about who made what knives, because in the knife industry, particularly, I mean, certainly now also with modern knives, but also with older knives, with vintage knives, there was a lot of, a company actually makes a knife, but the knife isn't stamped with that company's name. Maybe they make a knife for another company who then, puts a different person or club or company's name on the knife. So it can be really vague and murky who actually made a knife and what the kind of string of, people involved in the knife really is. So I was excited just to learn that these were made by a so-called Olbert's factory. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of information on that itself, but just finding, a name of a factory that made these knives was pretty cool. From what I could read, it looked like this Mr. Buster, went to this factory in 1975 and got to see the different tooling and patterns that they had, and then kind of took that and established a relationship with them and ended up making a lot of different patterns. So that's one thing I saw in several different places online about Fightin Rooster, and also Bulldog brand, which was also, associated with Frank Buster, is that they made a lot of different patterns, and patterns that maybe not a lot of other American companies or brands were making. And so this is actually a great example of that. This first knife here, this is a curved Barlow, which is something that you definitely don't see made in America often. More commonly, you might see a curved Barlow made in the UK or obviously in Germany, but you do see them even still being made in the UK, a curved Barlow. Now this is a classic serpentine Stockman, so it's a pretty common pattern, but certainly a very cool take on it with some interesting features. Now, I want to show you those two different tang stamps on these knives, and you can actually see that these are also etched with the year. So that makes it pretty easy and straightforward to know when they were made, or at least when they were released. But you can see this one says 1981, and it has the two roosters here fighting, and therefore the Fightin Rooster, and Solingen on the front, and then on the back it says Frank Buster Cutlery Co. Germany. This is from what I've seen online referred to as the first run. So this was the first run of knives. There might have even been some earlier knives where there was no stamp for Frank Buster, but this is kind of the first non-pre-production type knives, and has these two stamps. And then on the later knife here, which you can see is 1997, so still almost 30 years old, but significantly less than the other here. You can see that instead of just the roosters and Solingen on the front, it says Fightin Rooster, Solingen on the front with the 2 roosters, and then it says Frank Buster and Son Celebrated Cutlery, Germany on the back here. Hopefully, I can get so you can see that pretty well. So that's a good way to differentiate between the years if it doesn't just have the year, etched into the blade. But from what it sounds like, a lot of them actually do have the year etched into the blade. Another thing with this etch is that this is a really cool, actually, etched, engraved in. It's not like just an electro etching like what GEC uses and what Case uses a lot of the time and things like that. It's actually, carved down into the blade. So you can hear, and hopefully Trevor doesn't have a problem with me doing that. I don't think it's going to hurt the knives. You can hear my fingernail going into those letters. So it's not something you see super often these days. It is something that Cooper Cutlery actually did recently. So kind of going back to some of this older styling of knives here. It's a very big etch on both of these knives. So if you're not a big etch person, a big billboarding person, might not be preferred, but it has lots of info on there. You can see this one, it says International Fightin Rooster. Interestingly, their contraction of fighting is very interesting. Fight, then the apostrophe, then IN. So instead of just the N, and then the apostrophe is there instead of in place of the G. So that kind of bothers me from like a, I don't know, grammatical or whatever standpoint, but definitely interesting. And then Cutlery Club. So apparently they had a Cutlery Club. Hopefully you can see that it keeps going out of focus. And it's one of 600. Yeah, one of 600. And then it's actually etched, or engraved, I should say, 357. So it's kind of cool because you know that there was only 600 made, and that this is number 357 of 600. And from what I saw online also, there was a lot of that, a lot of knives being made for cutlery clubs, or regional clubs, collector associations, and things like that, which is really cool. I appreciate that because I help run the Barlow Bearcat Club. And I know that it's great when a company will make a club knife for a club. Speaking of the Barlow Bearcat Club, this is a really cool Barlow. It has this elongated bolster, which makes it a true Barlow. It doesn't have a shield, which I always appreciate on a Barlow. It does have a stamp on the bolster, which is really cool. It's the 2 fighting roosters. Now, I'll say real quick, I don't love the, iconography of the fighting roosters. There's a little bit of I don't like the idea of making 2 animals kill each other for fun. I don't think that that's an unpopular opinion, and I think that it's probably a brand name that I would avoid if I was choosing brand names, maybe even for collecting. But it is cool that it has the edge. It's a little bit hard to tell what's happening. If I didn't know that this was called Fighting Rooster, I probably would have no idea what that stamp, I might have called it an edge, but what that stamp actually is. Maybe a little bit more so here on the tang stamp, but it's not super clear. So again, don't love the brand name of it, but I suppose it's from a different time or whatever. But it is what it is on that. But it is cool that it has the bolster stamp. It has this pinched bolster, which is, again, something that you don't see a whole lot of on American-made Barlows. And then it's a curved Barlow, which is really cool. And I hope that GEC does a curved Barlow. I think it's the 39 frame that they could do it on. But then it has this really beautiful pearl scales, and I love, kind of fancy looking knives like this. Even though a Barlow is supposed to be like a working knife and inexpensive, they haven't really been that way for a long time. You can get inexpensive Barlows, but there's also been fancy Barlows for a long time. And boy, this is some nice pearl. I'll tell you what, it's pretty incredible. This is a big hunk of pearl, comparing it to some pearl that I have from Queen knives, which are a little bit later, later produced knives, there's more, I guess I would say, character. You can see the different kind of like topography in that pearl, and I think it's really, really beautiful. So I think Trevor has a really beautiful example of this knife here. Now this also has a secondary blade. It is pen in front, which I don't prefer, but it's kind of interesting. It's a long pull pen blade with a nice swedge, and really this is a nicely made knife. It's got strong pulls. This pen blade has a really strong pull, but no blade play, good snap. Actually pretty easy to get to the long pull on this main blade, so not a huge issue with the pen being in front, but no blade play on that blade either. Strong pull 7 or 8, I would say 6 or 7.5, maybe something like that, and well centered enough. Maybe not 100% perfect, but really a nicely made knife. The tips are not proud, so I think that this is a really, really beautiful, good example of these knives. It's a really cool knife, a really cool Barlow. I think that Trevor has a really nice knife in this, and I've really enjoyed getting to check it out. And one other note on the Barlow here, you can see it has flush joints. Kind of an interesting thing. Not the case with most GEC or case Barlows, and I'll show you, speaking of which, a size comparison to a GEC 15. You can see they're about the same length, but the Fightin Rooster is, a good bit chunkier, especially with it being a curved Barlow. So I really enjoy that Barlow. I've really enjoyed getting to check it out. And here is the second knife, the newer, the younger, I guess you could say, of the two. This one's from 1997, so I was actually alive when this knife was made. But this is for Jackknife Bob, which what Trevor told me was that it's basically a kind of like a knife collector slash dealer who would order a lot of knives and sell them, and I believe was a friend of Trevor's there, or something along those lines. I should have checked again what he had said, but something along those lines. And really cool etch. I do like this. I'm sure it was exciting for Jackknife Bob to have this etch on a blade like this. I think it would be really cool, and the kind of floral aspects I enjoy. You can see that this one, it's very small, but is one of 200, and this is number 42. Now, the interesting thing about this knife, like I said, it does have the different tang stamps for being a later knife, but the interesting thing about this knife for me is that it has celluloid handles. I don't know that I have any knives with celluloid handles. They are known for causing issues, and from what I've seen online, particularly on blade forums, maybe even more so, these Fightin Rooster knives had issues with their celluloid handles. So this, from what I can tell, is what they call waterfall celluloid. So to me, it looks like it's attempting to be an ivory, replacement, a synthetic ivory replacement. It has kind of the look of ivory with the lines and the swirlies and such in it. Not exactly like ivory, but, similar. I don't know that that's the intention of it. It is called waterfall celluloid from what I can see. But it's an interesting look. It's has a little bit of like a chatoyance to it, a little bit like those, I'm forgetting what they're called now, but those pictures where when you move it, it looks different. It kind of looks like that. The lines within it change a little bit. So that's really cool. But you have to be careful with this celluloid. It does outgas is what it's called. So it gives off a gas that can cause, eroding on the blades and oxidation and things like that. So you do have to watch for that. But it's been really cool to check this out and get to look at it because it is really beautiful. I would say that it's a really cool handle material, and it's too bad that it does cause those issues. I don't know of any acrylic, which is what, like for example, GEC and really Case too, they use different brand names, but uses in replacement for celluloid. I don't know of any that really have this look with that kind of changing look to it like that. So it's pretty cool. Now this knife has, isn't quite made as well as the Barlow. You can see gaps here. I would say that that's likely something that developed over time. It's not necessarily how it came, more from being that celluloid. And the pulls are not quite as strong or snappy. They are snappy enough. There's no blade, well, actually there might be a little bit of blade play on that one, but it snaps closed and has the classic, sheep foot and spade blade secondary. Just not quite as much of a snap, but it does still snap closed. And has those match strike nail nicks, so kind of an interesting look to it that Rough Rider Knives has really run with over the recent years. But a really cool knife, and one that I have really enjoyed getting to check out, particularly because of this interesting handle material. So two really cool old knives, both relatively old. This one almost as old as me, and this one a good bit older, about 10 years older. So it's always cool to get to check out some older knives like this and share them with people like me who appreciate them. So I hope you have enjoyed the video. I know I have enjoyed getting to check these knives out, and I really appreciate Trevor giving me the opportunity to check them out. I don't think I would have gotten to check these knives out without his, generosity and willingness to share. So thank you again to Trevor for that. And if you have enjoyed the video, make sure you click the thumbs up, subscribe, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. Check out my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.